Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rom. I, of course, am broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida, and I have from the Great Midwest RDV. And tonight's movie is number one from the something, whatever,
Number one of the Secret Service.
number one of the Secret Service. And the reason why that's um, appropriate for tonight's movies is we chose to go in a different direction tonight, and we like to go to different cultures, different types of films and genres, and try to experiment with while watching them and seeing what's going on. This one is a 70s British 007 knockoff, meaning British humor and all that too. And of course, 1977 RDV was the time of, like, say, Moonraker, which is, no matter what your feelings may be about it, certainly was the highest grossing one for a very long time. And it's certainly very entertaining by some standard. You've had other Bond parodies and ripoffs before this. You had one, I believe, with Peter Strauss or whatever the hell his name is. And I think it was called Casino Royale way back in the day, like in the late 60s, which is a bit of a shock. So we get, actually, I think it is in here too, at least for a little bit.
Yeah,
And I'm like, holy
Keenan.
shit.
Yep.
So there's a bunch of guys that look like somebody you might have known in British TV, and it has a lot of British humor, like, that we'll get into here. And of course, it's the 70s, so it's got the 70s, bastardized disco soundtrack. And so this is the type of movie that you would see as a B movie at a drive-in theater while you're, smoking dope and trying to get laid or whatever. It's that, and not that that's bad, or the movie, or any of that stuff. But this movie by itself, you just say, man, let me watch this one. You've got to be in the right mindset for it, because if you're not, you're gonna be like, what the fuck? I mean, let's be honest.
It's a bad movie, but I enjoyed it for the simple humor.
Well, they knew it was a bad movie when they made it, so at least they were consistent, right? They weren't trying to be anything other than that. So in that way, they succeeded.
So I gotta say, this is Nicky Henson in the main role is number one. He's, they even got down the whole bit as far as, him hitting on Money Penny, the kind of like a knockoff character, and then going into the office and speaking to M. And then just, I love the whole thing. He's like, you gotta use this 38. He's like, 38's for women. And got 357 Magnums. He's got two of them, and he does a little like twirling, like gun thing. Yeah,
gung fu.
Yeah, I love that. And then he drops it in the end, trying to impress the girl. They knew, they said they knew what they're doing. And when they made this is during the time when they were like you had the two Bond guys were basically fighting each other. You had Albert Broccoli and Kevin McClory, who just hated each other in the 70s. So he decided, he was like, you know what? Because this is the first time he's done a secret agent thing. He just returned to it. He's like, you know what? I'll just fill the gap and do whatever. Because he'd written one before called License to Kill.
Yes.
Yeah. Which that was just it was for producer James Ward. Which was basically a 1965 super spy imitation of the James Bond, basically with Tom Adams in the leading role. But Lindsay Shonteff, he pretty much, I was reading up on him, and he's like a guy born 1935, died in 2006 of cancer. But he wrote like a lot of B movies, Hired Gun, Devil Doll, Curse of Simba. Like I said, and then so this was actually a big hit for him, the James Bond spoofs. But when he came back, he did one called Bug Zapper, or called The Big Zapper in 1973. So that movie, which was actually Big Zapper, was before this, before they did a number of Secret Service. This was 1973, and that was a female agent at the time in the lead role, and just going around and just. And it's basically for that they would be considered back then like, well, you can't have a woman being like James Bond. It's dumb, it's stupid. Women being crass. It was, and they got away with it. But anyway, but going back to this movie, I didn't mind the little cheesy disco thing. At times,
I didn't mind it either.
Yeah, I know.
You have to know what you're getting into.
Yeah, so. When it comes to this guy Charles Bond, James Bond spoof type of character, like I really enjoyed it. Actually, if this had been a serious movie, I think it would have held up. Give it a little bigger production. I think it could have been. He could have been another Bond, or at least a
No,
competing role.
no chance.
No,
0.0.
no, better than George Lansby. Sorry.
Oh, you're completely fucked on that one. I totally go to the grave on it. No, so the reference, of course, you're making to is on our occasionally Bond review as we go through them in order so our young 20-something Professor Pixel can watch them and understand what Bond is. We've gotten up through For Your Eyes Only was the last review. Up to this point, we both believe equally that the George Lazenby Bond movie is the best Bond movie up to this point. I know you're not a fan of it and like him. That's just, we'll agree to disagree on that. The thing that is interesting about it, and I'll kind of combine some dots here, is that Lazenby himself was basically like he kind of bluffed his way into getting the role, and they needed it. And he's a good-looking guy. He's a physical dude. It's a different film. The film itself is what holds up, and Lazenby, it's hard to replace, James Bond, right? Especially the first one with by far Sean Connery, the one most people think's the best for whatever reason, and we can always debate those. That's a separate thing. But in the '60s, you had this huge spy thing going on, and that happened to do with the end of the World War II with communism and all that. All these spy movies, and British people had some great ones. You had like Richard Burton. You and I have talked about some of the war ones, like Where Eagles Dare and a few others. And so there's always that backdrop that if it's a British produced thing, even if it's a shit film like this, they can stylize it up and make it look pretty damn good. And they've always been able to do that well. And usually London being a big international city and pretty much one of the biggest cities at the time, and culturally speaking, you could get away with that stuff because you see all the 70s stuff going on here. It's not just a disco. It's the wide labels. It's this and that. It's the girls wearing no bras everywhere. And of course, when they're at the secret compound and the guy's walking back, these two chicks, doing like these half bullshit push-ups so that, middle school girls could do better, that they stand up and they're not wearing any bras. And the guy's like, I want you to keep abreast of the situation. That real snarky British humor. I'm like,
it was hilarious because like you said, like, he's like, this is our trainer. He's like, why are you outside? Anybody can find you. I was like, well, yeah, so he's like, and over here we have our female. We're trying a new thing. We're gonna have female agents. It's still under works. The two girls with the bras.
But that's the British way of being coy about the women's movement in the '70s and exploiting women in there and kind of like doing that winking nod at you. And that's the thing. If you don't get or like that sort of British humor, it's not going to work, right? And a younger audience today is not going to get that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like I said, I would have loved to have Oliver Reed make a cameo in this.
Oliver Reed, oh my God. It's interesting you say that because, like I said, when we see M pop up in here a little bit, that obviously leads some credence and some weight to the film because you're like, oh, that's the guy. I've seen him in Bond films, and he's whatever, and so he's in here. You're like, okay, at least maybe they doubled their budget just on his salary alone. But again, you think somebody like Moneypenny. Her character, we know what it is, but she was never in a Bond movie for very long. She never got probably a huge salary, relatively speaking. And so she worked on plenty of other things too. So there's no reason why you can't do that. So why not do a knockoff? It keeps you employed. You know what the role is. It should be easy to make, you would think, right?
Yeah.
This would have been like the precursor. Let me ask you this and see if you agree or disagree. Off the top of my head, I'm just going, you know what? This is very similar to what I would call like an Adam Sandler movie. It's going to suck. It's going to be stupid. It's going to be schlocky. He's an adult juvenile kid, which is not to be celebrated. Yet somehow it's not, I'm not going to say wholesome, but it usually ends on a somewhat nice note, and you can see it coming a mile away, and somehow you don't care. And it's annoying and it's horrible, but you can't help but find yourself watching it. That's what
I would say if it's today's Adam Sandler movie, it's going to suck. Back then, I enjoyed all his movies. So we disagree on that. But
I'm talking the type of film he makes. I'm not talking about which ones you like or you don't like.
So like I said, so basically, I want to say this movie is the template for Austin Powers.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Because Austin Powers had a lot of similar gags like this in here too, and he's especially in here he's trying to get with the girl he's supposed to be working with. The blonde, and he keeps spraying water on her. He's like, "Oops, don't you get so uncomfortable?" And each time she won't sleep with him.
I don't know if that's funny, but it's there.
It's fun. It's fun. I love it. As I said, the best way to describe this movie. This is a movie you basically it's a popcorn flick.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're not. Absolutely. It's not meant to be serious. I like went into it. I'm like, this looks kind of silly, but And I can say, is it a good movie? No, it's a bad movie with that you can at least watch and enjoy.
Yeah, and I think too, even if you're not,
Clearly low
I-
budget British humor, 70s.
yeah,
Like said,
and if you're not that familiar with the Bonds, then you don't have to be to
no,
watch
you
this kind
don't.
of a movie.
No,
That's the thing I look at it. I'm like, all right, it's watchable, and yeah, we get the whole setup with the spy thing, and a lot of people are wearing suits in here, which is cool because you don't see that in movies that much anymore, right? I
no.
mean, that was very prevalent back then, 50 years ago.
Yeah, I said the whole plot is basically, if you think about it, you get a description of it. Here, I'll give you a description of this movie. Number one is fearless, irresistible, and has a license to kill. He's assigned to capture a madman who is killing international financiers. And before getting the bad guy, he encounters mercenaries from the evil organization known as Crash. Crash is killing, rape, arson, slaughter, and mayhem.
Hmm.
Basically, it's a spoof on Spectre and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I like the guy who basically picked up his guns. He's gonna shoot him, and then he's like, oh, okay, he's just sitting, and then he's like, the guy goes shoot, and then bounce it, and then he's like, what the heck? He shot himself. He's like, bulletproof glass. Whenever someone puts a gun on me, the glass appears in my room. It's just stupid humor like that. Like I said, it is. It's not over the top. Like I would say that you get Will Ferrell. Will Ferrell is over the top, dramatic like humor. This is subtle British humor, which I can get behind. And like I said, right now I watch this on YouTube. It's only I can't find it. I can't find anywhere else. I don't know if I have to look up, see if it's even available for DVD to buy, because could not find anything streaming anywhere. There's a sequel. There's like 2 sequels to this. The sequel is called License to Kill, and then the third one's it's called the Number One Gun, which came out in 1990. Each time they replaced the main actor. Mainly because this actor, the guy's Nicky Henson, went on to do stage play, and theater production. So they had to get a different actor, and you can say this compared to the 90s is probably this the same production value, same stuff you're going to get, same type of humor. It's not as funny as Monty Python is, but I'd say it's kind of like that dry British humor you get from John Cleese. And whatever that show is about the hotel he does. He runs it.
So I would disagree with you on that. In that, when I think of Cleese, I think that's an interesting take, because Cleese it's more of a witty, sarcastic, almost vicious. You don't know how bad you just got stung by him. And the Monty Python, they're sharp in their way, so it's a little lighter. To me, this is more of the kind of the gross out sort of comedy, a la Benny Hill, which is extremely popular there, and here in the States as well, where Benny Hill would have women dressed up, and you knew what was going on. You'd watch the shenanigans ensue and all that, and you knew what you're getting. And so that's kind of what allowed it to be successful. And this runs up there just like that. It's not smart humor, it's typical humor, and cheeky, and that there's nothing wrong with that, because your point about being a popcorn movie, well on. The Austin Power movies, look, let's be honest. It's been forever since the third one, which I still kind of like chunks of it, even though it was only like 80 minutes long. And I think he didn't want to make it. But Mike Myers is hating the point that everyone's just probably saying, shut the fuck up. I don't care what you do. Don't, I don't want to hear from you or see you in public until you make another Austin Powers. It's like a curse, right? But that's how much people enjoyed it and spoofed it. And we saw in there, it's like he had classic British actors in there as too. Michael Caine, for one. The guy from Logan's Run was in there. So he knew what he was doing, because there has to be an element of truth in it to make fun of it. So these people that produced this film knew what they were doing as far as spoofing Bond and just spies in general. Spy stuff was huge back in the day, man. I'm telling you. And you and I here on the Xtreme Movie Show, we've covered more of the paranoia, changing of the guard, 70s spy stuff, rather than the action kind of stuff. And there is a difference between it, just like there's different types of the humor with it too, because Will Ferrell could star in something like this, but because he's done that stuff for so long, you're just going to be watching it because of him. Here, smartly, you really don't know anybody, so have a bunch of people you don't really know, and do what you're going to do, and it will work. It definitely can.
Yeah, like I said, and so this, I was trying to think of which Bond is he trying to go after. And I would say
all of them.
No, I'd say this one he was actually trying to spoof Roger Moore the most.
Well, Roger Moore certainly was hot at that time. I
I
mean, The
mean,
Spy
what
Who
he,
Loved Me, a lot of people think is
the late
probably
he
one
was
of
the
his
ladies' man.
best.
Yeah,
What's that?
Moore was the ladies' man Bond until Pierce Brosnan came. It was where Connery was more of the action. He did have the women, but Moore was all about being romantic. I'm the handsome guy.
He had to do it. He had to do the charming,
Yeah,
sophisticated style because people wouldn't buy him as like this athletic, intense kind of alpha one like Sean Connery. And Sean Connery, even though he dressed up and everything else there too, he was bodybuilder. He's an athletic dude. He's a physical Bond, whereas Moore was more of the, I'm going to accomplish my task by sweet talking you, which he did, and Moore slayed it in the '70s. I mean, come on, he was getting tail left and right in the Bond films. And you're right that the different approaches for what you're dealing with is something you have to take into account because it won't work otherwise. They definitely spoofed the man with the gold gun in here because I kept thinking of the whole, um, like when he's got the soda water at one time when he's like, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there. You got me so excited, I just had to spray all over you." And she's like, "Stop!" And of course, they zoom right onto her breast, showing with her braless
yeah,
shirt on.
yeah,
It's like, "Why don't you slip this something more comfortable?" And then nothing happens. You're like, "No, if that's Roger Moore, I mean, he's getting it." You know what I'm saying?
yeah. Uh, they said this is
There's a
91.
lot of Bond in here. If you're real familiar with
Yeah,
Bond, almost every
yeah.
scene is a Bond scene.
Like I said, this was a Canadian director, basically, who decided to basically, you know, go with the beat route and make money, and it worked. '70s, there's a lot of different movies that were still the same. Look at Hollywood in the '70s as far as the disaster movies. Everyone did one.
Yeah.
At '50s, everyone did the giant ants, giant spiders.
hmm That
uh,
was the man versus nature science fiction stuff.
yeah,
And then,
yeah.
yeah,
So,
you had the spy stuff in the '60s, and then you had, I mean, you have different things, but yeah,
so this I guess this movie never made it to DVD, but it did make it to VHS.
yeah,
Wow. But like I said, I like the fact he uses the 57 Magnum Smith and Wesson. You know, yeah, and then he uses the M2 Browning machine gun for the crowds. There is some subtle jokes. Like they said, he kills one guy, and what did he say? He said well, at least he had guts, and then the guy's like Arthur Lovey is like, well, yes, they're all over the deck, sir. There were some one-liners and I laughed at. Overall, I think I would have enjoyed it more if there was a better copy I could watch.
yeah, that's true because you could see this on YouTube for free, at least here in the United States. I imagine worldwide.
Yeah,
So I definitely know you can see that. You're right about the quality of it. I would agree with that. That would help it when you've got movies like this. You got to give them every little trick in the book to help it out. And a good quality print is always a plus for all of this stuff.
yeah, because that just like I was watching, I was like, this is kind of annoying because I was like, I know it would be a better experience to watch if it was actually like more clear. This was like watching like '90s scrambled, or '80s, stuff. I mean, you could see it, but sometimes the scenes were dark.
Yeah,
But the
yeah,
sound quality I thought was actually decent though.
yeah. And you know what would have made this movie more Canadian or American and even better,
What's
besides
that?
being American or Canadian? A lot more boobies.
Yeah,
And here's the thing about British films in general, they had their own kind of review board with some different standards than what we have here. So even going back to the '50s of some of the Hammer horror films that we've reviewed here on Extreme Movie Show, there was a lot of va va voom in them. I mean, with the way the women were, but they knew how the studios were going to respond as far as the ratings and everything too, and the blood. And they pushed the limits of it. So their like cheeky humor, taste, and what they do here, I think, matches up with that English population. Where by the '80s, we want bush, we want boobs, we want women walk around in their panties with the big hair, we want all that stuff. And you know what? It would still work today. It's just that nobody really does it. Everyone's a bit of a prude, it seems, which, whatever. That's another conversation to have. But this movie, I thought if they would have went for it just a little bit more, it would have been even more cultish. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
not quite trauma, but really go for it more. I mean, the British can be a bit too restrained even when they're not trying to, if that makes sense.
agreed. I guess overall, like I said, this is a one and done movie, and that's not a bad thing because a lot of movies I watch are one and dones, even the bigger production ones.
It's
The
better
ones I
than
don't.
Meg.
I've seen the Meg at least twice now. I had to watch it again, see if I'd like it more the first time. Yeah, it was all right. Meg 2's coming out. We'll see how that makes it better than the first one.
Yeah,
It can
as a
only
kid,
it can
I
only
would
get worse,
totally go
right?
see this movie. Absolutely, I would. No
Like
question about it.
this would have moved. As I say, the best way to describe this is a movie you would have watched if you came on TV when you was a kid, and you're like, okay, what's this? You're watching. It's like you may not get half the jokes, but you're like, oh, look, okay, this is kind of cool. It's got some spy stuff, but it's overall, it's not like Pierce Brosnan's GoldenEye where it's explosions and it's not like that.
Right.
It's just basically like you're like the Saint to me for watching, as I felt the Saint had a little more. I'd say the Saint had a little bit more production, but I mean, like it just kind of felt like Roger Moore's Saint. Roger Moore to me was better as Bond than he was a Saint. You may disagree. That's okay, but
Yeah, and again, with our Bond reviews, we've talked a little bit about the differences in how you craft the film. The film's going to be the film no matter what, and as long as you're consistent with it, people know what to expect. Then you craft how you're going to do those things. Like, do you really believe Roger Moore is going to be seducing all these ladies? Or Sean Connery, you believe, yeah, he would smack him on the ass. Whereas Roger Moore's got to be, really, really cute and coy and charming. Where it's like, yeah, okay, I see how he's going to perform. And you brought up a point too that's kind of interesting in that when you talk about these kinds of movies, yeah, they're supposed to be fun. You're supposed to have a little bit of good time with it. You're supposed to know that they're not great, and that's okay too. Not every movie has to be a perfect 10, and this certainly isn't and shouldn't have to be. I could not find any information on it in terms of its budget and how much it made because I was curious, but obviously if it spawned 2 sequels, then it had a certain following. And to make it to VHS after the 70s, that's no just cheap thing to do. It had to be popular enough where they were going to make their money and get a little bit of a profit and return on it. And so these types of movies, again, 50 plus years old, we don't mind diving into here on the Extreme Movie Show and checking them out. And thankfully, YouTube's a great resource to check some things out and see it. So this is one you came across doing on some movies you're researching. So I was a little surprised because this is one of the few British type films that I'm like, I know there's Bond ripoffs, but I've never heard of this stream at all. I've heard of some of
I
the others, Peter Sellers or whatever, and something else, but this one never heard of ever.
I don't remember what I was looking up, and like I said, I just popped up. And I was like, "What is this?" And it's just like, and there's I guess there's a lot of these too. And man, when you find movies on YouTube, like these are hard to find movies. Like
Yeah,
I mean, I know the other one, Big Zapper with the female, like it's gonna be bad, but that thing is a cult following for a reason. Same like this is a cult following. It's not as big as Rocky Horror Picture Show, but I watched a Facebook interview with the lady who played the main actress in the Big Zapper, which came out in 1973. Same
right.
director, same writer, and she says like I don't know why, but people love this movie, and and she's like she says back then there was no stunt women really, or doing this stuff. I had to do all my own stunts, and she says like and I got to learn like at least some simple karate moves and stuff, how to hold a gun, do this stuff. She says like I had fun. It was a blast. 1970s, early 70s. Women weren't really in these kind of roles, so it was like she had fun. And so when I see stuff like this, like it's like I love the fact that the actors still respect the work, even though they recognize it being a bad movie. You know, they're not out there like they're out there just bitching and moaning. Oh, you don't like this? Well, you're a fascist, or you're or this. We're calling you names. Like you don't know what you're talking about. It's like it's like I said, I love these simple movies like this, man. If I could find some more like these, I know Rob's like I don't want to watch anymore, but like I
No, that's
love
not true at all. I like some bad films too, and you're bringing up a point again here that I think is pretty interesting. Is that
yeah
we're talking about films that just are fun,
yeah
And this movie
Yeah.
does have a sense of humor with it, you
Yeah,
know.
I love the rare, hard to find movies, and that they're available. So I can find it. Unfortunately, we had to watch it on YouTube. I mean, if I could find it anywhere else, I mean, cool. But like, what's hard? It's a hard to find movie. It's only, especially when we found out it only went to VHS. That's probably could be why the quality was so bad over
Yeah.
the YouTube, because it was on VHS trying to transfer it over.
Mhm.
And man, wow, it's just like I'm curious now. I want to go see if I can find a better copy. Like I tried finding the Big Zapper. No one has it anywhere. I gotta see. It's probably on VHS still. Kids. This is why you hold on to your VCRs.
Yeah, I know, right?
So you can find and watch movies. Oh man, but
Well, like I said, we like to tackle things here on Extreme Movie Show. So if you're out, listening to this and you got some suggestions, let us know. We recently did a review of Excalibur for DVD Daddy. That's doing pretty well as far as reviews. I know we have different opinions about it, but we both feel like it's a pretty strong film, generally speaking. Whether we like it or not, it's a whole different matter. And it's kind of like this film. It's not a good film. I think we both agree on it. We both agree it's a sense of humor. I didn't chuckle as much at it as you did, but then I also grew up watching Doctor Who and Benny Hill and all that stuff. So
no,
to me, I was like, yeah, I'm familiar with this, But if you're not, you recognize, oh, it's kind of different than the United States. And so you're watching to kind of see what's different, how they handle it. But again, when they're having fun, literally on the screen, you can't really hide that chemistry, and it comes across to you and makes you almost like it more just because they're having fun. And I think that's one of the biggest appeals to it, why it allowed it to be so, not because it was spoofing Bond, but because it was fun and the people in it were having fun. We don't have a lot of movies like that today. They're laborious, they're stiff, they're kind of boring. It's like, you're right. When are we going to have a fun movie? Where people are just enjoying making it and everything else there too, where there's just that joy element to it. And this one I would pencil in for it. It's not high on my selection list, but I'm glad I did to give it a chance. What final thoughts or observations do you have, RDV?
final thoughts, man. Like I said, this is available on YouTube. Just type in number one of the Secret Service, 1977. I mean, the best thing if you look at my IMDb, and I love how they say it's like more like this, and then you find there's like Undercover Lover, Big Zapper, Number One Gun. And it's just movies that aren't done by him. But I love the '60s, early '60s and '70s, like whether it's British or it's like American. Like I mean, if it says it has IMDb score of like 5 or below, I'm interested because I want to see how bad it is. Like this only had with a 4.8 or something like that, or 4.5. Yeah, it's not. People look at ratings like, oh, it must be horrible. Oh, I can't believe I watched this. This is blah blah blah. It's like no, it's I, this knows it's stupid and plays to its strengths. It's not a
Yeah,
horror movie where it's like where they don't know they're stupid and try to be serious and it comes out horrible.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
I,
All
I'm
right, there you have it, ladies and
yeah.
gentlemen. Number one of the Secret Service, 1977, free on YouTube right now, at least stateside there. Check it out. Let us know what you think about it. We'll be coming up with something offbeat probably again next week too. And of course, always have our Sunday night service going
Yeah.
on, so we'll be looking forward to that. What were you going to say?
I was just saying, what would have made this better if Mel Brooks would have done it and then like a Carrie Hughes, like James Bond, or Kelly Elways, what do you call him?
Well, wait till we do the producers. That's all I'm going to say. Wow, or any Mel Brooks film. Yeah, it's starting. Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting. Um, that's a good question. Why did Mel Brooks never do a spoof of like James Bond?
It would have been awesome.
He did Robin Hood though.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Have a good night. Take care, Ed. Good seeing you again and chat. DVD Daddy, get better. It seems like you're posting more now, which is good there too. Enjoy the Excalibur. For RDV and everybody involved here at the Extreme Show, have a good night, and as always, stay extreme.